Thank you so much, everyone, and welcome back. I'm so excited to kick off this very timely series, Eggshells, Mental Health and Racism, dealing with real conversations about how to cope in broken environments. And I'm doubly honored to be joined by my sister, Dr. Nasiah Cirincione-Ulezi, national and international board certified behavior analyst. And when I say sister, I don't mean, oh, we're all sisters and brothers. I mean, same DNA, same house, same fights over the comb and brushes growing up. And I welcome you, sister. I'm so proud of you. I love you dearly. And I just have to say, funny story, we literally both started working together at age 7 and 8 years old on a 32 house paper route on the east side of Joliet, otherwise known as the Hood. And, you know, if kids started working that age now, they put them in jail. But that truly is our history together. And I have to applaud you because I know I'm biased, but you are, if not one of the top minds in your field of behavior analysis, the top mind. And you're very humble, but you know it's true. Your history, and I share that history of walking on eggshells, dealing with racism, and really just that complex interplay, or maybe it's not so complex at all, throwing mental health into the mix. So I'm delighted you're here. And you know, I talked to you last month and let you know I'm going to kick this series off. And I didn't want to do it if it wasn't real. We have a lineup of about 15 of the most prolific minds and individuals on the planet. And we're starting with you because I really want to dive into this real conversation. So welcome, sister. And can you take us inside of your first eggshell moment when you knew just kind of tread lightly?
Yes. Okay, sister, thank you for that introduction. And I will, but before I do that, because there's so many people, possibly thousands of people who are going to be watching, I want to publicly just express how much I love you. For those of you who don't know, yes, this is my sister who's been rolling with me for darn near 50 years. And I will tell you, for those who don't know, me and my sister, we talk practically every day. And it wasn't until I was an adult and realized that, wow, not everybody talks to their sibling every day, that I really developed a deep appreciation for our relationship. So sister, who's been with me on this journey for nearly 50 years, know that I appreciate you. I appreciate the role you've had in helping me raise my son and in my family. I love you, and I am so grateful that in all these years, we can still have our conversation.
Yes, thank you.
They're my lifeline. I love them. So bless you, sister.
Thank you.
So to answer your question, you want me to go way back.
Yeah, first eggshell moment.
First eggshell. Okay. There's been so many due to our upbringing, the unusual circumstances around our upbringing. There are a lot. I will tell you what the first one was. Do you remember the very first day we went to St. Jude?
Yes, I do. You want to give them some backdrop on our grade school?
Yes. My sister and I, as she stated before, we grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. No, not predominantly. It was an all-Black neighborhood. In our vernacular, we call it the Hood. And at an early age, I think we were 6 and 7 years old, we were taken out of our local public school, and we caught 2 public buses every morning across town. And from ages 6 and 7 to ages 13, 14, we attended a very white, affluent school across town. So I think I was the only little Black girl in my class. And you know, Sheila, you were the only little Black girl in your class. And there was one little Black boy in your class. I will say this, for me, my experience at that school was incredibly traumatizing. And going back to that first day, I remember, do you remember walking into the office and they had us try on uniforms, because this was a Catholic school, and then they walked us down to our classroom. And what immediately struck me, because there were only at that time 12 children in the class, I think I made number 13. I looked out and all the faces were white. And I was probably a whole head taller than every little girl in there. And for us, for people who don't know, my sister and I are taller women. So that is very salient when you're talking about 6 and 7 year olds. So up until that time, Sheila, I don't think race was that salient in my life, because we had been in environments where there was no other. Everybody was Black. So I just remember, and as the weeks went on, it wasn't just skin color. I realized we talked differently, we walked differently, we played differently. I don't know if you remember, but that was one of the complaints of the adults. They would tell Mama, they said, well, they don't really play with any of the other children. They only play with each other.
Right.
And looking back, I mean, thank goodness, I'm so glad I didn't have to go through that experience alone. Thank goodness, because I remember on the days that you weren't on the playground, it was a lonely place.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have anybody to play with.
I remember it very well. And I also remember a time, it was a particularly rough day that you had when we talk about eggshell moments. And I would love it if you shared that about the mayor.
Well, so we'll fast forward a few years. I got there in 1st or 2nd grade. By 5th grade, at around 10 years old, I remember it vividly. Do you remember when Mayor Harold Washington was elected?
Yes.
The pride that I felt. Now, we didn't live in Chicago, but I watched that election. I remember just sitting in front of the TV and rooting for him. And I was so proud because, again, I was still at that point the only little Black girl in my class. I had never had a Black teacher. So this man became, for me, such a symbol of accomplishment and leadership. And I remember, and you know, I'm just getting to the point now, because I shared this story last week and I couldn't do it without crying. I'm just getting to the point where I can't cry. But I remember when I was 10 years old, he died. And there were a lot of questions around his death. And I remember when I heard that he had died, I was in school and I was devastated. And at that time, you're at 10 years old, you don't have the language to say I've been traumatized. But I remember feeling I'm in this environment, nobody's gonna get it. I don't know why I feel this way. But I remember I swallowed the pain of his death. I held back my tears and I pushed on with my day.
Yeah.
And now when I think of when I see in our society now, Black men and women being so brutally murdered by the police, I just wonder, you know, who did they take away? And what child in our society now is going to have to swallow their pain and hold back their tears because people don't value Black life.
Right.
And the expectation is we just push on.
Yeah.
Just push on, which in 2020, I'm no longer willing to do.
It is that constant need to swallow it, push on, that has the mental health of so many folks, Black and brown folks, compromised. And that almost automatic, and I call it a conditioned suppression. It starts early. I remember, you know, same school, we walked in similar shoes. I was just a little girl in the 4th grade, and I had duty. I had to count the milk cartons. You remember the little chores we had to do?
I remember.
And I was just a nervous little girl trying to do my best and get all the milk in the carton. And one of the nuns, I got the milk count wrong, and she reprimanded me with a racial slur there. And I remember that water fountain right outside of the milk counting room. I took a drink of water, and I said to myself, don't be a problem.
Yes.
Be a problem. That is a conversation you would go to your parents and have, someone, but I remember that automatic response of don't be a problem. And that auto response stayed with me for years. And it was a lot of therapy and healing and searching my soul and support to come out of that energy of swallow it, take it, don't be a problem. So one of the things that I want to ask you is, can you talk to me a little bit in your opinion, and you've worked with families, children, individuals locally in your state, all over the world. What does that kind of suppression do to a person over time?
Sheila, what doesn't it do? What I'm going to tell you, I want to back up just a little bit, because of the structural and systemic racism in our country, there are parents who are put in positions where they have to choose where their child goes to school. And some parents are choosing in the direction of, I need to go outside of my community in order to get my child a good education. What I want to say is, if you do choose to do that, be mindful of the fact that we live in a society, as is so readily apparent today. We live in a society where all of us are walking around very self-unaware. So we lack awareness, and there's an incredible amount of implicit bias that negatively impacts Black-skinned people. And the bias comes from all ends. We're all swimming in the waters of it. We are all a part of it. So what I want to say to parents, if you are in that position, be aware. Know where your child is going to school. Be ready to advocate for your child. Be ready to be a stable and consistent presence in your child's life. Sheila, for us, it is by the grace of God that we sit here before each other today, and we've managed to carve out pretty stable lives with a pretty consistent and healthy self-identity, going through.
Not without a lot, and I really want to stress, because part of my angle in the series is the mental health component and the backlash that comes with finding your voice and advocating for yourself, even in reaching out to some very heavy hitters all across the country. Many of them, yes, Sheila, love you. I know your work. Can't wait to talk to you and join you. I had people well into their careers, 40s, 50s, sidebar, darling, love it, love what you're doing. I'm with this corporation. I'm not comfortable out of fear of how it may be perceived. I want to have the conversation, but I'm just not comfortable. And that is in 2020. So there is an inherent stress that goes along with not just advocating for your children, but it's back to that eggshell dance. How do you balance that and still find your voice and walk upright in dignity? What advice do you have to balance that very delicate dance that we all do? And if people say they're not doing the dance, hell, I'd love to interview you and ask you how, because that has been part of my greatest work, and my greatest work in terms of personal development is clearing away that conditioned garbage that holds you back.
Absolutely, Sheila. This is what I'll say, and it's funny because I'm coming into a lot just as everything is unfolding in light of what has happened in this country and the hyper focus right now on race. Now, what I want everybody who is watching to understand is that for many of us, not everybody, and I'm not trying to speak for all Black people, but for many of us, what has become necessary is for us to shift identities. We started that at a very young age. I knew pretty early on in this all-white environment, I needed to do things to survive. I needed to do things to make sure I was part of that white social group. That is the position I see most of us as Black Americans are in, which is why when you hear a lot of white people, they say they don't understand, is because the Black people that they are coming into contact with, when they come into contact with us at work, we are not often our authentic selves. That is not the real identity of who we are, or I will speak for myself. Who is showing up at work is very different who's showing up at the dinner table at home. And I think that shifting identities for us is survival. Now, as you know, Sheila, recently in my life, I am not as vulnerable in the workplace as I was years ago. Why? I don't have any minor children at home, okay? But if you are in a situation where you're trying to feed a family, you are trying to keep a roof over your head, somebody else's head, everything can't become a battle at work. So what do? Back to what we said earlier, a lot of us push back the tears, swallow the pain, and keep moving on. What I know today is that comes at a price.
Yes.
It comes at a physical price, and you pay a mental, emotional, and spiritual price. So what I have done, I have taken a very close look at what my values are, especially in light of my new situation, not having people as dependent upon me. I have taken a close look at what my values are right now. And I know my core values are fair, respect, maintaining dignity. And what I've said, when I am in situations that don't align with my core values and I feel like I'm out of integrity, I am going to restore integrity. If that means speaking to whoever is in my environment about how those core values are out of alignment, I will do it at whatever expense. And for me, what I have decided to do, if that means seeking out legal counsel, I will do it. I've recently assembled a support system for myself because it's no longer acceptable for me to shift identities and in a very public way. What I have recently shared, Sheila, is I've been so complicit in the racism in this country because me shifting those identities has really served to keep white people comfortable so I can stay comfortable. I am no longer willing to do that. And it's taken work, and I am in a position where I'm not as vulnerable, but I'm asking everyone to just do a self-assessment.
I think the self-assessment is so key. And thank you for being real, because I think we are in a very real moment. And I hope that most of us are beyond or quickly reaching the point where we are beyond the superficial conversations and the reality of the backlash that you were just talking about. Punishment comes in a lot of different forms, and that is real. And it takes a certain amount of courage and self-reflection to even do that deep analysis. All those years ago when I was working inside a formal corporate structure, and I was punished for wanting to be creative and wanting to be innovative.
Yes.
And that punishment hit me very hard. It was, no, so you're talking too much, we're going to demote you. And my answer was, it's going to be hard, but I'm going to go out here and branch out on my own to do what I need to do. Hence, Rebalancing America and Beyond was born. That said, that is not a viable pathway for many people. And one of the things that I want to say in terms of corporations and companies, when you don't deal with the inherent, the unconscious bias, the racism that is happening in the workplace, you lose the best and brightest.
Yes, you
my
did.
Very best, I was poised to give my very best to this company.
Yes.
And they shut me down. And a lot of what was behind that was just systemic, inherent racism. So I had to go elsewhere. So the punishment that we talk about is very real. So there is a lot of fear around even opening your mouth to have the conversation, which is why at this time in our history, I am more hopeful than I've been in many years that a wellspring, a tide is turning where we can at least begin to have some real conversations. Can you talk to me a little bit about why it is so difficult?
Yes.
Even people who, Black people, brown people, white people, I have a good heart. I want to sit down and engage these conversations. And when we get down to the nitty gritty to talk about it, recently I had one personal situation, one professional situation, again, eggshell dance, hurt feelings, anger, what have you. Even in this climate where we're so-called, our minds are open, can you talk to me about why it's so hard to have these conversations about race and race relations and the binary response that people are talking about?
Yes, I would love to, Sheila. Let me preface it by saying this. The information I'm about to share was actually created by a professional social worker named Robin DiAngelo. She's the author of White Fragility.
Beautiful book.
She puts forth in her book a very significant and meaningful piece of information. She describes the good-bad binary in terms of racism. So what is the good, bad binary? Under bad, we have racist and racism. And when we think of a racist and racism, that bad person is usually going to be older, white, Southern, probably not very well educated, probably not a really good communicator, and probably very socially unacceptable. So there we have the bad, the racist. And on the other side of the binary, we have the good, the non-racist. Who is the non-racist? In this country, we have identified the non-racist as the young, well-educated, probably Hillary, Bernie supporting, socially acceptable white person. So what we've created is an understanding and a relationship with these words where people who are these good people are not able to associate themselves with racism and racist behaviors because they look at it as other. It's something somebody else is doing, which is really what is concerning me about what's happening now. There's still very much a sentiment that this is what those police did, the other did, the bad people did. What I am challenging everyone to do is look within, each and every one of us, because we're all a part of this system. It is not a question of whether or not you are racist or you engage in racist behaviors, because of the systemic and structural racism you are. I need you to ask yourself, how are you doing it? Because when we start from there, that's when we can start having conversations about change. So we really have to do away with this good, bad binary in terms of racist and racism. So the progressive liberal white folks can see their role in maintaining and supporting these structures.
And and you bring up so many good points. And we get into this really robust conversation the other day, and I kind of want to pick it up at this point in the interview where we talked about, how to get us all off eggshells and get us on some more solid ground where these issues are concerned. And I had brought up to you that so much of this boils down to two words: fear, what we're afraid of, and what we value. It is very difficult to take away someone's opportunity. It is very difficult to harm someone. It is very difficult to isolate yourself from someone when you know them and you value them and you are not afraid of them. So a huge chunk that's missing out of this conversation is we don't know each other. We don't know each other. It is so important. And I don't just say this to white people. I say it to Black people and brown people. You don't need to travel around the world to have a cultural experience. It is so important that you dialogue with people who look different than you, who sound different, who go to different churches, who appreciate different things. That is how you break down barriers. And here, I mean, you look at all this crime, and you look at what is happening in corporate America and what's happening inside of schools. The root cause of that is, if I don't know who you are in my spirit, then I'm going to fill in gaps with stereotypes, with bias, with what my mother told me, with what I saw on TV. So a huge piece is getting to know each other, and not on a superficial level.
I agree, sister. Well, this is what I want to do, sister, because I think we take for granted that everyone is as fluent as us in cross-cultural relationships. We have become really good at it, Sheila.
Well, it was thrust upon us
It
early.
was, and we can really, and our lives are reflective of it. I want to have another conversation. We can do it next week. And I really want to walk people through how to do it. Because in the workplace, at school, people don't know how to show up. The first part of it is we have to create more affirming spaces for Black people. Okay? And there has to be really a shared burden of what racism has done to our society.
Shared burden. Talk a little bit more about a shared burden.
In my experience, even now, I'm looking, people are putting their diversity statements in place, and they're getting their diversity committees together, and they're looking at a quick fix. And what I'm suggesting everyone do is we really all should be looking at all of our systems, not just what the diversity and inclusion. We should be looking at all of our systems and looking at, from the perspective, how is this system affirming and safe for Black people? And I am going to unapologetically emphasize Black, because the sentiment in this country, and quite frankly, the sentiment around the world is anti-Black. Because you can be Latino, but if you're Black and Latino, your life is harder. You can have a disability, but if you have a disability and you're also Black, that is going to lead to significantly more challenging outcomes. So I need for everyone to understand, because when we have these conversations, there is intersection, and identity is a huge part of the conversation. But what I'm speaking to now is the anti-Black sentiment in this country that really has to start by Black people and others knowing how to share space and have authentic conversations. So I really want to continue this, Sheila.
I do too. And I want to read something, and then I have a final question for you. My phone and my email has been blowing up the last few weeks, from friends, people across the country, local folks. At the end of the day, the same question is being asked. What is this all about? What can we really do? I want to read something that I feel really clarifies and will crystallize what this is truly all about. Thomas Jefferson, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is all about what everyone yearns for, what we crave, what we are born and desire is the freedom to walk into a room and to be not, I don't see you, I'm colorblind, see me. Mm-hmm. See all of me. See what I come to the table with.
Yes.
I want to be free. I want to come to the table as an equal, the full weight, depth, breadth of the opportunities afforded to everyone. So I love what you shared about sharing the burden, if you will, because it's getting heavy. Yes. For a lot of brown and Black folk, which gives me, when I see the protests, the marches, there's people of all different races, shades. Let's get busy sharing the burden and shifting things. Before we get into how people can reach you and this prolific work you're doing, can you share one thought and one idea for the collective, because people are struggling? What can I do? I want to impact change. I want to be effective. Can you share one idea that you have?
One idea, and I mentioned it, but I'm going to mention again. I want everybody to keep the conversation going. But between now and our next video together, Sheila, what I am going to ask that everyone do is identify how they are contributing to these systems of structural and systemic racism. Do that painful work. I had to look at myself and get real. How am I supporting it? And I realized, yes, I have been complicit by trying to keep white people comfortable, Sheila.
Yes.
I have not said what needs to be said. I have not pushed back at systems. I own that. I own it. And I need everyone to take a look at the role they've played in it. Because if we keep othering this, we're not going to get there. It's racism is looked at, oh, it's somewhere out in the ethers. We can't feel it, touch it, but those bad people are doing it. We're all complicit in it. And we need to identify why and how.
I love that. And so you're doing some amazing things in the world. I know you and we have a book coming out. We have trainings and lectures around opening your mind, diversity, all this in the works. Tell folks how they can reach you. You've got a YouTube channel. You're constantly putting out exceptional content. How can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. The best way to reach me is my email. It is Nasiah999@msn.com. N as in Nancy, ASIA 999@msn.com. My YouTube channel, please stop by. It's called Ulezi the Advocate. ULEZ as in zebra, I, the Advocate. I so look forward to engaging with you. Stop on by. I'm putting out a lot of content, specifically in the next couple weeks related to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
That is amazing. I have to end by saying, check her out. I don't say it just because she's my sister, but I love her because she is Dr. Nasiah Cirincione-Ulezi. I don't mind saying this to the world. This is a badass sister, creator, the whole 9 yards. So thank you for this. We'll definitely do a part 2, and I appreciate it.
Yes, I love you. Thank you, and see everybody soon.
You too.